an interview, a sample interview for us with some students that she may be teaching next year, and she handled them like a champ. And they're not the easiest kiddos, especially in the summer coming in not knowing that, and she really did a great job. And as Keith said, enthusiasm. Another fine addition to peer review high school. The recommendation we have for peer review elementary school, some of you may recognize the face because she's not far removed from the peer review school district as a student. I remember her in my old neighborhood because she's the kind of wave that you drove through the neighborhood, and she's not that little girl anymore. So but we have a very exciting recommendation for our first, our first grade position, and Dr. Horns can.
And yes, I'm excited, but I have mixed emotions because this just shows how old I am. Because she used to be, she is I believe, the very first former student that I had that I hired. So it just makes me feel a little older. But as a young child, I could attest to her wonderful bubbling personality, and that kind of shined through during our interview process. And this is Mackenzie Band. She graduated from Edinburgh in 2021 and went on to get her Master's of Reading. So we're excited about her having her reading specialist. And she served as an AmeriCorps at Fairview Elementary for 2 years, for the last 2 years in the summer, helping with our summer Title I program. And I'd like to welcome Mackenzie as our new first grade teacher. I
had a chance to be with a bunch of AmeriCorps kids this whole weekend, and they were so excited. Their leader, they called her, is going to be teaching in the district and working with first grade. And she's running a terrific team, a really well-established team who will take her under her wing and make her an even better teacher at their elementary school. So it's fun. It's fun seeing our graduates come back. Walter at the last meeting, right? And now Mackenzie tonight, to see these folks who did so well at high school students to come back and now get back to the community. So welcome. Congratulations. Mr. Lyons?
Yeah, so like we usually do, we want to welcome you to Fairview, and the board usually likes to get up and just meet you and say hello. Congratulations. So here we go.
Ready or not? Thank you. Hi, baby.
Let's get on
Getting jobs. It makes you feel very good. Well, I was yeah. Yeah. Her best friend. Her best friend.
I wonder how you know her.
We used to be on the board. Yeah, I just spent a weekend with her. 50th birthday. That's all I'm saying.
The trauma of that.
I gotta figure it out.
All right, folks, we'll jump right into the safety and security discussion. So this is kind of just a follow-up from the executive session that we had last month, and Brian Raz is here to chime in as well. We did some calculations that the board had asked in that session to come up with some numbers. And so we did that, and we also looked at some different scenarios. So we looked at the possibility of obviously 1, 2, or 3. And we looked at that from 2 different things. We looked at that as our employees, what those costs would be. And then we circled back and entertained the notion of those folks being sheriff deputies as well. If you recall, and maybe just through body language, if nothing else, Brian wasn't real keen on that idea initially. And I think that was mainly because, I'd like to speak to this, but mainly just because of that whole power structure thing. If they're coming in here, are they going to be working for him or working for the sheriff's department? I think since then, in talking to some of the folks from the sheriff's department, we've all warmed up to that possibility. We definitely warm up to it when we see the cost, because it's a cheaper date, number one. But number two, we also get some people who are very highly trained and specifically trained to be school resource officers versus finding somebody that's doing the training themselves. So what we need to know from the board, we'll show you the numbers, they pop those up, but what we kind of need to know from the board is, A, how many are we talking? What's our thought on how many do we want to pursue? And then once we get that ironed out, then how hard do you want us to pursue with the sheriff's department? Brian has spoken with the chief. They've given us the preliminary, hey, we can probably make this happen for you. I put a call in, didn't get a call back yet, so I'm waiting for a call back from him. So we think we can make it happen with 3 sheriff deputies. And quite possibly, you can find people who are currently sheriff deputies of school districts who just want to come here because they still have a union situation and a situation where they can come. We don't have the exact number for sheriff deputies up there, but we can tell you, we can give you an idea of the difference here in cost. Dave, do you want to give a quick explanation of that?
So for cost-wise, Eric and I worked with Officer Raz to come up with basically what it would cost for adding 1, 2, or 3. And really, it's just, we figured out the cost of 1, 2, and 3 is just that many times more. There's really not too much savings, and everybody, they all need uniforms, training will be individualized, so a lot of those costs are going out. So after we factor everything in, the cost of 1 additional officer comes out annually to about $68,000. These would be rough estimates that we'd be going working off with. So obviously, 3 times larger than that is the cost for adding 3. So overall, it would be an extra $205,000 to put a digital officer in every building for the 22-23 school year. We have just the nominal increases going up along with the future contracts that we have through from there on out.
Does that include the car and the equipment?
It includes equipment. There wouldn't be a vehicle for every one of those officers, though, because they would be coming specifically to, I think we talked about this, coming specifically to one building. That would be their spot, so we wouldn't need additional vehicles. We did come with amounts for, there a lot of was included in this equipment amount. Brian gave us a very long, detailed list of what would come up for equipment and training. But anything that someone would need to walk in the door and be fully equipped and trained, what they need to do day one is included in these figures down here and continuing months after that. You see slight savings in that going forward because they would already have uniforms, they already have certain things. So years after that, we would see slight savings in that, but that's the only number that goes down. unfortunately, everything else would go up. So overall, so really, if we wanted to hire our own employees, a very early preliminary estimate that it really would be about a 1.13% increase in real estate taxes to cover it if that was the route we chose. That's really just a perspective-wise number, just to put it in perspective on what kind of costs that we're looking at. If we do go this route, we'll have longer discussions about what the funding will be for it.
So just to compare that, so if we went off of say 205 as the number, to compare that, we think that the cost of 3 sheriff deputies would be about 135. So you can see a significant difference in cost there. There's some advantages and disadvantages, right? If we hire these folks on our own, we could probably look for some retired state troopers. We could look for some retired, like Mill Creek or Erie City police officers who would be interested in doing something in law enforcement for a few more years. And we think they would be really good employees. They'd be a part of our staff, et cetera. With the sheriff's department, though, there's some things that we get that we wouldn't get by hiring our own folks. We get people who would probably drive sheriff vehicles to work every day, 3 of them. So that would give us 4 security vehicles on our campus. They would come with all the necessary equipment in their vehicles. They would come in uniform. They would come highly trained and have the school resource officer certification already. So there are definitely some advantages there. We would have to find folks who understand that their job here is to secure a building and not necessarily make the decisions that our school safety officer is making. And Brian they have to understand that Brian's in charge of all safety, and they're just in charge of one building. But again, after having some of the initial conversations, we feel pretty comfortable that we can pull that off. Okay.
So we're saying 3 plus RAF?
We talked about, Brian said to the board last meeting that would be the ideal
That's
situation.
the ideal. Okay.
But again, we're waiting for, that's what we want to have discussions tonight for you to kind of drive that.
Was this in board materials? I didn't see it in there. Was it?
This calculation, I believe, was not.
Okay. Could you put that in there for us?
To make sure to share that for you.
Why is our cost so much higher?
The main driver will probably be our retirement and our health insurance costs, much more. But we probably, when it would come out down the county side, some of it would be covered based by county costs, and we would be covering the entire cost of that employee for the county. They would have some insurance also. But a lot of it would be our benefit package.
We also wouldn't have a choice officer. It's a good position where if they get it, it's theirs, right?
We had a choice with Brian. So I think we would have some say. I think we could say no to somebody we weren't crazy about. And I know Brian has already sort of put some feelers out for some folks already who he knows. Yeah, and one of the differences, David, also in cost is that for the sheriff deputy, when Brian was a sheriff deputy, we paid, I believe it was 3/4, Dave, that's what we figured. Mm-hmm. We paid 3/4 of that, of his salary and benefits, and the county paid the other 1/4. So that's why it's significantly cheaper. We don't pay the health insurance costs, and we certainly don't pay the research costs. And their salary's low.
They would be 9-month employees versus.
We would have them for 9 months, yeah. Now, we would have these folks for the same amount of time, 186 days. So we were able to finagle with the county when it was just Brian. Brian, we were getting you like, the first couple of years, we got you like 1 week before school and 1 week after school. Right. But then you never wanted to go back.
Yeah.
So we would always ask them if we could keep you a little bit longer.
Yeah. I would be here for the entirety of June and August. And I'd go back there for a month.
But use your vacations and never go back.
Basically.
Because going back there means going back to work in the courthouse. And that's what those guys really don't want to do. They want to be in school, be around kids.
And we have to provide those benefits? We have to. Okay.
Now, we wouldn't necessarily have to. They could opt out of the health insurance if they already had it, but we have to provide PCERS for our employees.
So I'm just curious, the pool of deputy sheriffs that are out there. So if other school districts are looking at doing the same thing, is there an unlimited pool of deputy sheriffs, or how do we?
No, there isn't, unfortunately. I'm not quite sure what that process would look like. I would think So I know there is a few other school districts that have inquired and already approved for another officer. I think Seneca and Corey. So that's my only uncertainty with the sheriff's office is that if they're willing to put the effort, because they're going to have to create more positions, the sheriff's office. So we'll have to go in front of council and they'll have to request or ask for more positions made. So that's my only uncertainty. I don't know if they're going to be willing to put that effort in to do that because they're, from my understanding, they're looking at another 6 positions to create based on just those us, Seneca and Corey, the request of more officers. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what that would look like as far as being able to get quality individuals. Either route we go, I think that's the most important thing, that we get the right type of person in here. So I'm not quite sure what that would look like working with the sheriff's office.
And do we feel that we're gonna get another you? As far as the relationships with the kids and
That's the goal. That's the goal. I feel confident that we'd be able to get the best around the area.
Now, what about, okay, so before, the sheriff's office was not paying at a wonderful rate,
Right.
correct? Is that still the case? Like, are people going to possibly be coming in and then leaving for something else that's better?
Quite possible. Yeah. That's a factor for sure.
You know how many openings they have today in the sheriff's department? Are they struggling to find people or are they?
I don't think so. I don't know for certain.
And why would the county want to pay that 25% of the benefits? That just seems.
Well, because they give them for the other quarter. So they work for the county. They're still a county employee. They're just placed here 9 months a year, and then they work there for the other 3 months.
but are they gonna be in a police uniform or are they gonna?
They'd be in the deputy uniform, sheriff deputy, just like Brian used to wear. Yeah, full uniform. Fully outfitted with all the equipment. A car with all the equipment.
Would you rather have 2 people that we hired ourselves at like the higher rate to ensure that we would have people that would want to stay? Or would you rather have 3 through the?
That's a good question. A good question.
And is there enough, I mean, I know like secure the building and, keep our kids safe, but if we have 3 plus you, is there gonna be enough, stuff for them to be doing the whole time?
I don't think so.
Should we start out?
And
Well, I was saying like 2 and have 1 each building.
Can I ask you, if and this is not the case, but if money was not an issue, which route would you want to go? If it was equal?
2.
If the cost would be 3 deputy sheriffs and 3 of our employees, which one, if the cost wasn't an issue, right? If it was equal, what would be a better solution for our district?
I would want to meet the individuals first. Okay. So to answer your question, I know that doesn't help at all, but that's really what it comes down to.
And maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe you post the positions as employees and see what you get, and go get candidates from the sheriff's department, see what you get. Then come back to the board and say, we really have better people right now at the sheriff's department, let's fill it there. And if those folks don't work out, then we convert them or vice versa.
And honestly, I think the call that he's waiting for to receive back from the sheriff's office, we might not have another option. The sheriff's department might not be an option. So I think that we need to have clear communication with them if they're actually willing and capable of supplying us 1, 2, or 3 more individuals.
I mean, ideally, talking with Brian, what would be really, really nice for us, and like we said in the last meeting, the Cadillac model would be to allow Brian to roam the campus. Just be in charge and roam the campus and still do all of our drills and still organize all of our safety and security for events, and then have 1 person assigned to each building. That would be the ideal situation. I think that would make us as safe as we could be, right? If that didn't happen, let's say we had 2 folks, and Brian's still going to be tethered to a building. right? And we'll have the other two people in the other building, which is fine too. But Brian has relationships in all three buildings, so I wouldn't really want to keep him in one. And if we had to make a decision, where do we put Brian Raz, that'd be a tough call, because all three principals we're going to have arm wrestling matches. And,
Well, and maybe they rotate, maybe they're not assigned, maybe not every day, but maybe monthly or weekly, because you want them to get to know the entire population.
And the buildings.
And buildings, and the teachers, and.
It's true.
If we do
I
the,
think we need to be cognizant of tax increase, but so pretty substantial.
if we do the sheriff's department, is that also include a tax increase or not?
It'll include a tax increase. It'll be much smaller. We have some pretty good news on the state budget too. I mean, we have a really healthy increase that we weren't expecting. That would help to offset this in a good way. It probably wouldn't involve a tax increase. But those are the tax. That's the associated tax increase with the amount. But we're getting a nice chunk of change from the state this year that we weren't anticipating that we didn't budget for. So if we look at that, what was the final number, David? I'm sorry.
For 3 officers, it would be for 22, 23 to 205.
Yeah, and we said with the sheriff's department, it would be around 135.
4%.
So there's no way to get it without a real estate tax increase? There's no money anywhere else?
No, there is. That's just showing what the real estate, what it equates to in a real estate tax increase. It's not saying that we have to increase taxes.
That would be discussions as we go farther along here.
Is there money available for this? I know we originally started with, didn't we get some sort of grant for, right? So is there anything like that available right now?
So sort of new, which was just passed in the budget last Thursday. We found out that, and we don't know the full details of this grant, the application is still even in the works of being created right now. But within the budget that was passed on Thursday by the state, Fairview will be getting a $127,000 grant for physical safety. That is at least, that is for sure definite for 22-23. Information from the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials, they think that might be continued going forward. That would all relate to, what happens in Congress over the next years, but they think that it's likely that could be continued annually going forward. So at least for this year, 22-23, there's another $127,000 that will come in for physical safety of our buildings. We'll figure out the details of that and how that can exactly be spent, but we think a lot of that, if not all of it, will be used to offset costs of additional officers.
So obviously they were looking at roughly half that cost. Because this is like 70,000.
Yeah.
So instead of 4,000, we're looking at less.
Yeah, so you can look at it more like, good idea.
What do we spend on after-school security? Would we be able to utilize any of this, these officers? Comp time kind of things.
Yeah, the problem is that Brian's a 12-month employee, so we can flex some time with him, and these folks wouldn't be, so we'd be paying them the same amount. And actually, it might cost us more because we have to pay them time and a half. We probably better off to stick with the security we have. We pay the security that we have, I think, 27 an hour.
Close to that, yeah. And that doesn't equate to a very significant amount throughout the year.
Just want to make a couple of comments. One, I think the money we've spent over the past several years on securing our schools has been money well spent. We've done a lot of safety equipment in over the years. So I think that we're in pretty good shape as far as that's concerned. The only thing I would like to see, and this is all stemming from the Texas incident recently, is, I know that we'll get classes and everyone in the federal stuff that impact, especially now with new construction, one window in each classroom that can be pushed out like a bus window. So kids can get out of the window and get out of the room that way. I'd like to see a little bit of money go towards something like that as well. Because even having 4 resource officers, I think we're still better off putting a little bit of that money toward some escape route for the students. But otherwise, I think, my opinion anyway, and this is us, those of you who are here every day, think differently. I think we've got just about everything else covered. I mean, I don't know that there's any other piece of security that we would need. That anybody feels necessary. The problem areas are always, seems to be bathrooms, hallways, more common type, whether in the classroom, but it's, if kids could get out of the classroom, those 11 kids who were stuck at their table there, just think of that. You know, it was a way for them to get out. It's a way to push a window. And I don't know what that would cost. And maybe now that we're doing this construction, is the time to do that.
High school would be a challenge. We're gonna have some folks up on the third floor, so.
Well, yeah. It's your first floor, third floor is gotta be under. I don't know, maybe there's a, you know, like a fire escape that can be lowered, you know, by one lever or something like that, that they can pop the window and get down. You know, or maybe not every single classroom, but every other classroom, or every, I don't know. It's just been going around and trying to all this, trying to figure out ways that these kids could have possibly escaped had they had some other route.
I think the direction, Jim, that we're looking for tonight, the direction we're looking for tonight is how many folks do you want us to pursue? And then what's your first choice? Like our own employees are pursuing some of the sheriff's department. Like I said, I'll have that phone call this week with the chief, and we'll see what their availability is. He may tell me, as Brian said, he may tell me that they could never pull off 1, 2, or 3 people this year. Or he may say, we'd love to get 3 more guys. And I would think that's a feather in their cap to have more folks in the district keeping schools safe. So I think that they will make it happen, but I can't speak for him. I don't know him. Brian knows him really well. But that's what we need to know. The direction we need to know is how many would you like us to pursue, and then from what direction do you want us to pursue them.
I don't feel comfortable making a decision or even giving direction until we find out all the information that we need to make a better decision, or, you know, one to move forward with and put work into.
Well, how about just the number then? And I mean, because that way that tells me how many we're looking at, and I can give the sheriff's department some idea that we're looking at 2, or we're looking at 3, or we're looking at 1.
Well, if I could, I appreciate having choices. That's good, but I think it would be good to have a recommendation from you, Brian. What would be, you know, we've talked about it in executive session. What would be, it sounds like the 3 is the Cadillac for now. But it would be good to have a recommendation from the 2 of you of what you'd like to do, for us to have options. Cost is always an issue. And then Fran, you know, I mean, your comments there, I mean, they're really good. I mean, I don't know what we can do, but I think about the same things, what we do differently. But I would also say I'm not an expert there. You know, I want to bring somebody else in that's an expert on things like that. You know, either maybe Vince knows things that other schools are doing. I wouldn't want us as a board to try to come up with solutions there when that's not what we do. You know, but I think it would be great to bring other people in that are experts. But I think for us it would be good to have, you know, a real recommendation of what you would like to do to protect our kids, and then with that, like everything, we have to weigh the costs, benefit.
Yeah, the timing between our last meeting and tonight just didn't give us the amount of time that we need to coordinate with the sheriff's department, but we will, and we can certainly have all that information by August. We didn't expect a decision tonight, just more of a direction, how you want to go, and types of numbers that we're looking at.
I think we always want to know what's the best situation.
And maybe once you talk to them, you'll have a clear understanding that maybe we can't even go that route.
Yeah.
So until you know that, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best situation, and Brian, the best situation is for us, people that we think are going to fit the best in each situation. So, I mean, to hire our own folks would probably be the best situation. There are some things we can lose with that, though. I love the fact that Brian has a vehicle, even though it says, you know, security on it. It looks a little bit like a Mill Creek Mall cop car. It does make people slow down when they see it. It's still a security vehicle, but those sheriff's cars, those are police cars. And the other thing that the sheriff's department brings to us is they bring arrest powers that Brian doesn't have. Ryan used to have arresting powers. He never had to use them, unfortunately, but he could issue tickets, he could issue citations, he could arrest people, and the sheriff deputies would have those powers where our folks don't. So that would be a nice little added bonus as well.
But you simply have to call the state police. You have to do it.
We don't have to.
I'm just saying, if you needed to, so
We
like
do.
you don't have an
Yeah,
option.
we do. And by policy, a lot of times it says to contact the police, and the sheriff isn't really police, so we still call the state police anyways. And we like to keep that relationship with them too. So.
I mean, knowing we're on a timeline and school, the start of school is 8 weeks away or 7 weeks away, would it make sense to advertise the positions pending board approval as we do everything else? And see what kind of candidates you get, and say, try to see what's available, rather than wait a month before you start, because you won't have them by the time school starts.
That's a great idea, David, because we've done that in the past, and until the board approves a position, it's not a position anyway, so we can always see what comes in. That's a great idea.
I agree with David on that. I think that we should advertise, if, especially if you think there's a possibility that the sheriff's office might not be able to come up with one, two, or three. Because even if you started with one, you know, even if we don't get our head, we get one, then at least we have that name, because school, not that far away. It's really not, and so we can't really hope that we're gonna have another security officer at the start of the school year
Yes.
if we don't start the process rolling. You know, because even one more is better than what we had.
Sure. We'll get it posted tomorrow.
Well, and maybe it ends up being, we don't hire them, find someone we like, and we say, we've chosen this year to only hire sheriff's deputy, would you go? I guess they could with the bidding process already. Actually, or maybe.
It would, I think it would be very person specific, I'm not sure. Most sheriff deputies are very young. Very young.
How did you figure out the salary if you're retired state trooper?
We made it up.
Okay, so you could do it down, especially if you're already retired, you're already getting retirement there.
We put $25 an hour in.
But I'm saying it's possible that that could be lowered, because I don't know, and you're lovely, I mean, we all love, however, state trooper training, I believe, is different than sheriff deputy training, am I correct?
Oh, sure.
And so we possibly could get, you know, a retired state trooper and we could lower their salary. That's not fixed, correct?
We just made that up. We just pulled a number out of here. $25, we figured that was a relative cost for.
But they might be willing to work with them. I'm not saying that.
I mean, we used a little bit of prior knowledge on that. We looked at what other school districts were paying their folks, and that's about the average. Some pay a little bit less, some pay a little bit more, and that's about the practice.
You know, I like the way this is laid out, though, it's very easy to bump up. You know, what the cost is gonna be in the projections for the next 3 years, and the percentage equates to real estate taxes, you know, mileage, all that kind of stuff. The way this is laid out is really nice, so if we had this for the, you know, our own employees versus deputies, just to look at a bottom line in every possible scenario.
Dave will be able to put those side by side once he has the actual numbers from the county.
With the border patrol so close, would they ever entertain?
I think they might make too much. I think those guys will pay pretty well.
Yeah.
So can we get, after you have your conversation with the sheriff's department, can we just get an update on that,
Absolutely.
even though,
Sure
you
will.
know, just send out the information and then
Yep.
know where things stand?
Yep. And if you know of anyone, and there's 90 of you here, you know a lot of people who are, you know, retired troopers, retired military, retired New City, those talking to you here, there's going to be nothing coming out, and you just shoot your information through our website. Or-
The sheriff's office is gonna fill 60 positions. What's that look like? You're not gonna be able to pay their senior guys, right? You're gonna get some new guy on the street. And how long does it take them to hire 6 guys, train them? Or we're not even talking anywhere near the school.
Yeah, you know, there may be a situation though, like, you know, you look at If you look at Mrs. Pataki, who we hired last meeting, she came to us from Northeast. You look at Walter, who came to us from Erie. People like to come here. And so there might be a sheriff's deputy at Harbor Creek or Northeast or Seneca or Iroquois, you know, who might want to come to Fairview. So, not that we like to steal from other districts, but and if they're good people. We'll see what's out. We'll see what's out there.
Well, we can't approach it, we can make the entire act.
Sure. We'll be much more prepared next time. I just wanted to kind of put it, we had it scheduled, Jim wanted to talk about it, and so we put it out there just to give you the information that we have, but we'll be a little bit more prepared next time.
And can we make sure in that preparedness that we include other avenues of funding it?
Yeah, I mean, when this calculation,
Sure.
so we didn't even know
That's
that
okay.
that 127,000
Yeah.
extra funding was happening,
Right.
so that's.
Yeah, I know
More
that's.
really with passing a budget on, I guess, June 37th, it just kind of messed up.
Yeah, yeah.
And are there any other, is there anything else we need in the way of security that we should also be discussing at the same time? Is there anything that anybody sees a hole anywhere?
Did you go to that guy that came into town to speak? I did, yeah. You went saw him. Was there anything there that was earth shattering?
No. No, not really. I've seen it before. It was basically the same presentation that I saw from him 6, 7, 8 years ago. And he really didn't talk about like physical security, things like that. But I recommend, this is new, ask the principals. I'm sure they have a laundry list of things in their building that they would put on top of the priority list as far as security wise.
That should be raised here, that should be executive session.
Yeah, just I would say, I'll chime into what Brian said, because I went to the presentation as well. And one thing that resonated with me that he said was, and he listened, and this guy knows every school shooting that ever happened in the United States, and they bring him in to consult, and he trains every branch of the military. He's a pretty impressive guy. But one of the things that resonated with me that he said, and I left it, was of all the school shootings in the United States, there's only ever been one where there was an armed guard inside the building. Right, Brian? Never said one where an armed officer was physically in the building. Because, you know, he said all the time, people go and check out banks, they go and check out jewelry stores, they go and check out schools. If there's an armed guard, they move on to the next one. That was too tricky. That was too difficult. And so that resonated with me, that doesn't happen very often, where there's someone armed in the building. And we've talked about, you know, I don't think I said this in the last meeting, but maybe I did. We talked about going down to the Ross Park Mall a couple months ago. We just went in and, you know, browsed in those high-end stores in there, and every one of those stores, Rolex, Tiffany, Cartier, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, there's an armed guard in every one of those stores, in addition to the mall security. And they're in there securing purses and belts and shoes. There's something to be said for securing children and adults and people, right? And so, yeah, but that was one of my takeaways that he said there, that it just doesn't happen in schools where there's guards.
So maybe not have a car sitting out front, knowing which building the officer is in.
Yeah, I bet 75% of the time you know where Brian is, but that other 25% of the time he parks his car and posts it to a building just to mix it up.
But that's an argument for internal, right? You wouldn't have cars.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah, you would never know. Well, thank you. We'll come back. We'll come back with much more information in August. But that gives us a good starting point. Obviously, there's direction to add security, so that's what we'll take from that.
You just know the importance. I'm sure everybody in the board deals with this issue.
Absolutely. Folks, for our mental health discussion, we have our two school psychologists here tonight, Tony and Shelby, and obviously we've spent a lot of time talking mental health over the last several weeks, to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways, and we have a lot more of those discussions scheduled over the next several weeks, including this week. As Tony is going through and Shelby are going through the presentation here, I will chime in. I guess I'll just kind of start this with, Dave, you have full opportunity to take it over. I will start with this. We called, you know that we have one showroom approved, and we've already signed the contract for that, and that's going to happen at Fairview High School. After the very unfortunate death of one of our students here at the middle school a few weeks ago, we got on the phone with AHN the very next day and told them of the importance of having at least another room at the middle school for next year. And it really pushed them hard to get another room for next year. They won't commit to that yet because of funding and because of personnel costs, but Justin and I were supposed to have a meeting with them on Friday. One of the folks who was supposed to meet with us got sick and then canceled the meeting, and we're looking to reschedule that. So we're still hopeful that AHN is going to pull through for us and bring us another showroom to the middle school.
When you say next year, do you mean?
I mean this year. Yeah, I mean this school year. The other thing that happened just late last week, and Karen, you might be aware of this from Brad, but just late last week, we also learned that we are getting a grant from the Erie County Department of Health to bring in another mental health professional to our building. Every district in the county who wants it, much like the pandemic coordinator grant, every district in the county who wants the grant, the Erie County Department of Health or Erie County government, whoever, got approval to use some of their ESSER monies to fund a mental health person for each school district in the county. What we know right now, I have that meeting this week with the Department of Health, so I don't know the specifics on this yet. We haven't met with her. But for now, I think it's just a one-year opportunity with the funds that they have available. But it's going to give us that additional body. So our plan would be, if we get the showroom at the middle school this year, obviously it would go, we have the high school, we have the middle school, and then we would add this third person that we're getting through a grant to the elementary school building. If we don't get the showroom, then that person will probably be a combination between the elementary school and the middle school, where the greatest needs are. So we have at least one more person coming. That's the good news. I don't have all the details because that meeting, I think, is Wednesday or Thursday of this week. But we are still working on AHN, and they're supposed to schedule with us again this week. We've offered to do a lot of the legwork for AHN in terms of advertising, helping them find an employee. We've actually given them a couple of names of folks who we think are interested in the position. That's what made it go so smoothly the first time with the high school, because we already had connections for that. We basically just handed her over to them. They were thrilled to get her and her two therapy dogs come along with her. So we're hopeful that we're going to have a person in each building for next year. And Tony has some of that data. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
Would everyone willing to work in the middle school if necessary? Does she require that?
Oh, she would work in the middle school. I think she's going to be pretty busy at the high school though.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what the greater need is, high school, middle school. And I don't know who can make that determination, but
I think just
maybe-
based on
maybe you guys
counts last year, it's probably still the high school with the greater need, followed by a very close second here with this building. Go, Kelly.
The children, will you be addressing it, or is this my only opportunity?
We were gonna talk about it, now's a great time, right?
Now's a great time.
Yeah.
Where is it going to be located in the high school? Please?
So right now, it's going to be located down the hall from our new wing with our tech ed and photo art lab. It's going to be outside of our ceramics room.
Does that mean it has window access?
It
or no?
does. It does have windows, a lot of natural light. So that was done intentionally. Now, space is a very hot commodity in the high school
I
in
know
the
it is.
22-23 school year. It will have a more permanent place in the new building, which will also have plenty of natural light windows.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Okay, and if we get it in the middle school, where might it be?
That has not yet been determined. Steve has a grand plan to have it in the, I get the names mixed up. This is the multi-purpose room, right? So it's the LGI room. So Steve's grand plan is the LGI room, which is across the way, of making that space into kind of a mental health suite. It does not have That room does not have windows to the outside, but it does have access to the courtyard. It's right there. So his plan was to utilize the courtyard, utilize that whole space as a mental health suite that would encompass both a chill room and some additional office spaces in there for counseling. So Mike, unless there's a better option, I know that's been his dream though, is to convert that room.
Yeah, it gives us a significant amount of space for that. His space, like any building, is becoming, it's at a premium for us too.
It is at a premium, but if we don't do it now, schools never have enough money, they never have enough room. If it gets into a basement, it's not gonna come up to the surface. So courtyard sounds really lovely. The other thing I was just wondering, I know we were using the goggles. Yeah. I'm even wondering if some of them could have more of nature in it, or if a child went there and just needed to see something or be somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe the beach, and they could put these on and have a beach around them, or the mountains, or whatever. Some kind of access so that they can actually see and hear. Do you think that's
for
possible?
sure, like some virtual field trip, like
That's what-
absolutely, yeah,
Do you think that's possible?
for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
AHN has a pretty good system set up. I wouldn't be surprised if they have some of that type of stuff already. There's a science behind their children. They want them painted a very specific blue. They dictate that color, and the stations that they want set up in there, they dictate that. All right, Tom. Shelley?
Alrighty, hi everyone. Thank you guys again for having us in to talk about what we've been doing here to address mental health needs and talking about that resiliency portion too. I think the last time that I was here with the board was when I was new hire. So I officially started and I just felt so welcome and I'm so thankful for this community. So again, thank you all for having us here. I'm going to begin with talking about mental health existing on a spectrum. I'll also discuss a little bit of resilience and also our mindset moving forward. Then Tony will jump in and take a deeper dive into what we've been doing already as a district and then plans for the near future. So we have about 15 to 20 minutes of presentation time planned. And then after, we want to hear from you guys, feedback, questions, anything that you guys might want to contribute. So I'll go ahead and jump right in talking about mental health on the spectrum. So you guys may have seen this graphic before. It goes from, someone being well or mentally healthy all the way to a person who might be recovering or maintaining their mental health. As you can see, right in the middle rests that unwell or mentally unhealthy state of being. And so while a small portion of our students might be there, the vast majority of them would identify with being at that well or mentally healthy spot. And below that spectrum line are action efforts that accompany the varying state of mental health. So while we work to support the students who are feeling unwell, get connected with treatment or supports within the school, our goal is to also focus our efforts on prevention and identification of those students with a moderate to low need. So why resiliency? I know we've heard this term quite often, and why is it important for our students to learn about it? Well, being resilient is the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, especially through that mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility, and also adjustment to external and internal factors. It's really how we as individuals learn how to bounce back. Resiliency means learning how to engage with the world and learning how to cope. And at the core, resilience is the belief that while you can't control everything in your life, there are some things that you can control, and that includes your attitude as well. So research has demonstrated that resiliency is something that can be taught to us. And this is a quality that we want our students to know, to understand, and to really feel empowered by, because when someone feels resilient, they can more easily overcome obstacles thrown in their direction. And these skills obviously can be transferred to outside the classroom as well. So the key here to building resiliency is really being proactive and taking the necessary steps to support the development of this skill and also provide opportunities for practice. So when thinking about the mindset that we need to take on, we should consider that resilience works like a muscle that we can grow and build with effort and repetition over time.
We want to keep our muscles strong and flexible so that we can think of many different ways to solve a problem. So when educators help students cultivate an approach to life that says, hey, obstacles are okay, and this is a part of success, that's when we're helping to develop resilience. And you know, it's not a genetic trait or anything. It's derived from the ways that children learn to think and to act when faced with obstacles, both small and large. And with the adults in children's lives, like us educators here, we help people develop resilience. It helps them emerge from these challenging situations with a positive sense of themselves and their futures. I think that we can all attest to the fact that it has really been a struggle for our students and our parents with this pandemic and its wide-reaching effect. And there's so much stress going on here. And as many of us have witnessed, there's been this huge wave of mental health support needs that our community is displaying. So to address this wide spectrum of need, we're going to talk about mental health supports at school in a way that's similar to how we talk about MTSS for academics. So this would incorporate universal prevention practices for all students, which includes screening tools to help identify which students to target. Then we can begin to address which individual students and which groups of students have that most need.
Yeah, we thought it was important to kind of put these kind of framing guideline kind of questions up here for just really deciding every step that we take for supporting mental health. Because some of the feedback that we've gotten since like the January board presentation, when we were up here kind of reviewing resiliency in the first place, and we've talked to teachers since then. Well, what is resiliency? How do we teach it? You know, what's the lesson plan? That's kind of what we're used to. And there is no lesson plan for resiliency. It's kind of everything that Shelby was just describing. We've all kind of heard the concept of, well, you know, stressful events make you stronger, right? But that's really just very traditional thinking. What we found in research is that stressful events provide an opportunity to grow, but unless you have a context around you that really answers the second question, growth really doesn't happen. So we just wanted to make sure we're really emphasizing that everything we talk about really should be answering one of these two questions. You know, just a good example of that is something that we're especially getting up at like the middle and high school. You know, it used to be, you know, give kids their grades. If they do well, awesome. If they don't, then they learn from it, right? And just now we just keep moving. And within the past, you know, 5 or so years, it's been, oh, wait a second, like we need to be more sensitive to the emotions they're bringing on a daily basis, and you know, lay off the pedal a little bit if we need to, right? And it's almost like we've swung too far sometimes in the opposite direction. We've heard from families or from, you know, staff, like it's almost like, well, we just need to give a kid a day off if they seem like they're having a rough time because we don't really know what else to do. It's because we're not doing a great job answering those two questions. So what we want to try to find is that happy medium where we have given skills and we have given a context and an environment of support for those kids so that we can say, okay, we need to get well, here's how we're going to get well. And part of getting well is getting back into the classroom and demonstrating growth and still having this academic success. So really staying focused on those two questions allows us really to continue pressing at academic level as well. Okay, so one of the things we want to start with, like Shelby said, we want to look at this through that multi-tiered systems of support type model. So we want to start at that tier 1 level. And just as a refresher, tier 1 means universal. Every single student in the district is receiving this, just as part of the package of being prepared. So as I asked around, it didn't seem like we've actually shown some of the scope and sequence of our Character Strong curriculum. So I thought that was really a great starting point, especially for answering that first question of what skills are we actually, you know, proactively teaching our students. So Character Strong is our social emotional curriculum that we've been using for the past few years, K through 8, in some form, you know, as you go up, you know, developmentally up the scale here. But this is the scope and sequence of that curriculum. So I'm not going to read every single one to you there. But you can see these are the sort of skills, again, if you go at that first question, what are we actually giving to our students? This is what we're providing to them kind of up front. So then, how do we kind of follow up on that and provide that context around the students? You heard me talk about at the January presentation, Pbis. That's a framework for proactively teaching behaviors and having everyone be on a more common kind of language basis of expectations for students. We did that training in June, and I'm going to show you a matrix that came out of that. Now, just more, this is draft. This is the very first draft that came out of that meeting. So it's going to continue to tweak and evolve, especially as we move towards actually rolling out with everybody. But they worked really hard on this, and I think did a great job of what we're talking about. So what you get with Pbis is a matrix of expected behaviors, and this would be across the entire building. In this case, this is Fairview Middle School here. And what I wanted to zoom in on is you end up with these overarching expectations, right? And then you define them more specifically in different areas. And one of the overarching expectations we want to focus on is resilience. And you can see what we got into was specifically then, what does that look like? And I think what I was thinking about answering that second question, I thought this was just a great example of a day-to-day basis. It may be the counselor or a mental health professional delivering initial instruction of coping skills or whatever those skills are, but every single teacher, even though they may not have that training and they're not as well versed on delivering those skills in the first place, they're going to be able to look for those skills and reinforce those skills. And I expect students to be showing those skills and help them, when they don't show those skills. So I kind of wanted to give you a little preview of that. Again, this is working stages. There's still going to be, I promise, alterations to this. But as a concept, this is that you teach a message, and how do you reinforce it day to day? This is going to be one of our avenues for doing that. Okay, the other thing we did this past semester were the universal mental health screeners. That's on the next slide. We'll dive a little bit deeper into how that links where we're at. The other thing I wanted to point out was just all the professional developments that we've been doing with our teachers. So they've been using the Learn Mental Health literacy course. Julie Skelly has been doing that for this, she's not here. I hate to brag about it, but she's been doing an awesome job of reaching out to. We had 46 staff members so far complete the modules, and I think we have another pretty large cohorts this summer going through it. So we're reaching a significant portion of our staff just in terms of creating or increasing their mental health literacy. In the spring, we also trained 60 staff members on youth mental health first aid. That is pretty in-depth training on pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's for finding students who might be exhibiting signs or symptoms of a mental health crisis and just how to help them and stabilize them in the moment and see how to help them. So again, we were able to reach a pretty significant portion. Those 60 were all middle and high school staff, so it's pretty concentrated. We got almost all of our staff members in the first grade. We're hoping to get more. And then just in general, we've been doing a lot of trauma-informed school practice trainings over the past few years. Really, we've done a lot of different trainings just to get our teachers just more on their radars, more on the view of, okay, how do I know more what's going on with my students so I know appropriately how to react to them. Okay, universal screener. So we were able to do the Pbis screener. Back in January, we talked about kind of two levels of screeners. One was more of broad screener that you might give everybody. One was much more in-depth. This was the more broadly focused one. We were able to trial it in May with 5th and 9th graders. We had really good participation in it. We did send out a letter where parents had a chance to opt out if they didn't want their students to participate. We only had 8 families opt out, so we had really high participation in that. It went really well from a teacher standpoint. We really tried to give them a lot of support to make sure it wasn't an extra burden for them. We got really positive feedback from the teachers that it was very easy for them to implement. We were able to identify quite a few different students who were at that kind of at-risk level, and every single one of those families received a follow-up phone call from either myself, one of the counselors, or one of the principals. And we got a lot of great feedback from the families too. Obviously, some of them already had some concerns about their student, but this just gave them additional information to have more conversations with their students. We were able to talk through different options. We didn't dictate anything that happened after that screening, right? That's still the family's choice to explore their mental health supports. But we were able to brainstorm a lot with families. That's one of the things we want to do more is just provide more of a liaison kind of service to those families. So we give you a knowledge base that they can access. So that's one of the things we're able to do coming out of the screeners. K through 4, we also trialed a couple of different screeners. Again, these are less than mental health screeners, more just behavioral type screeners. And we tried a couple of different of those just to see the results we got, see how teachers were able to interact with them. Those are entirely teacher rating. The students don't participate in those themselves. And again, we were able to identify one we think that's going to work really well. And so it's our goal next year that K through 12 will screen every single student in the district with these screens. It went really well this first time.
Are they screened more than once, or is it just one time a year, or is it like multiple times?
I think we're going to be recommending multiple times. I think you're going to be looking at 2 to 3. The nice thing with the Pbis model is you pay upfront for every student that you're going to screen, and then you can use it as many times as you want with no additional charges throughout the year. So best practice, you're usually looking at least 2 to 3.
What percentage of the students were at high risk?
We ended up at about that 5-ish% level across the board, which is when you look at that NTSS kind of model, that's about what you would hope to have up and no more than, right?
Okay, and then what type of follow-up is happening with the parents that you did contact?
So again, that's where we gave them direct phone calls or the one-on-one conversation that they had with a principal, myself, counselor, and we just talked through their options. We talked through exactly what those scores meant. We gave them copies of the scores that they wanted. We had a couple of parents say, I would like to take this to my doctor. Great, you now have this piece of paper that has all the scores and the descriptors for you. We had parents who had questions about just navigating the mental health world out there, which is very difficult to navigate. And so we kind of gave them tips and tricks, phone numbers, different things that they could do to find their services.
And will you continue to follow up with them in, so it's 5th and 9th, so 6th and 10th, will you be more focused on those kids?
Yeah, well, so yes, okay, that students we already identified.
Right.
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's through our staff meeting kind of structure. Okay. We kind of maintain that list of students we need to follow up on, students we need to keep an eye on, families we want to get back in touch with. So yeah, we'll be following up with those families.
How often will you follow up with them, and how long out?
It kind of depends on the student, right? I mean, if the family feels like they've got a good groove and they know what they're doing and they don't need a follow-up, then that's their prerogative, right? We don't need to hold their hands to that. If they continue to struggle finding help, then indefinitely, as long as they're one of a Fairview students, they're one of our students when we're supporting all equals.
One of the things that we're really lacking to right now, and it's every school, not just Fairview, is the best thing you can do with those parents is to call them and say, hey, your student scored in the at-risk category here. You might want to do something. Where in the future, we're going to be able to say, hey, your students scored in the at-risk category. Oh, and by the way, we have a therapist on staff. If you'd like your child to talk to her, in this case, if you'd like your child to talk to her. And we've never been offered that. And that's what the children's going to bring. That relationship with AHN is bringing that therapist. Not only the children counselor, but then also the therapist. And that's going to be the biggest bang for our buck with that program. Because right now, if Tony contacted 10 parents or 15 parents, it's hard to say how many, if any of those, were you able to even find a counselor. Yeah. They're not out there right now. They're not available. And the ones that are available are booked. If you want to see Kimberly Morrow right now, good luck. You're on a year waiting list to see her. She's the best of the year, and she's not taking new patients. She's full.
Is there anything else we can offer
So.
at this time?
What do you know? So this is where I'm going to get it, and Dr. McKay has already gone through the showroom. That's where we are aggressively requesting to have as many of those as possible. But yes, we do want to beef up our internal supports. There's other districts out there. Again, how do we do this in a way that our staff members are trained for? These kind of extra small student groups, mentoring, they're not something that you would just put on every single teacher in the district, right? You would find staff members who are able to facilitate these small groups for mentoring. There's a curriculum like zones of regulation. It's all about being aware of where your body is at, where your mind is at, and regulating yourself to a proper space. That would be a very easy curriculum for us to implement once we find the appropriate staff and time for that. I can talk around before. There's a curriculum called aggression replacement training. It's specifically for older adolescents with anger problems, right? And I was trained on that. I was actually given that training by a JPO who works up in Erie, and that JPO typically delivers that training. Now, usually with like a counselor or a school psychologist or something, but there's a lot of creative ways to make use of lots of different people in our building. You just want to find that right fit for whatever kind of small groups you might want to do. You probably already heard, we're doing signing groups, especially at the elementary and the middle school. We're doing some of those groups, having children on board, having the additional children staff. We're just looking to increase our own kind of internal supports there. So yes, there are more, curriculums in the future. You have to build these things up, without getting too far ahead of your skis. So, you need to have the capacity before you can promise, oh yeah, all year we'll provide this training. Oops, we ran out of time. We don't want that. If we say we're going to deliver a curriculum, we want to make sure we have the capacity. Okay, I wanted to focus in on what supports we're either providing now or looking to provide in the future, specifically for parents. We do want to follow up and give another mental health presentation of some sort, maybe tomorrow, of some kind to parents directly. If parents want to come in and learn more about mental health, learn more about what can I do with my child. We're definitely going to provide something like that in the fall. We're still zeroing in on what exactly that's going to be. That would give some sort of presentation in the fall. As soon as possible, that British Columbia Mental Health Literacy course, that is already available to anybody in the community. We're going to be creating a web page to go on the Fairview website that will have mental health supports. We're going to link that curriculum right on there, so anyone can go on there, start the curriculum, and put that sub-base for themselves. And then again, just touching on that liaison supports, because for so many parents, it's so difficult to navigate that world of mental health. We can't provide all the therapy in the world, but if we can at least be a knowledge bank for those parents, I think it's going to be a huge support. I've seen feedback from constantly from parents. Just they need help learning the language of what's going on in the world of mental health. So that's something to do. Last thing I want to touch on is staff support, because so often they get kind of caught in the wake of all of this. But especially over the past couple of years, they've been taking a beating in terms of their own mental health, in terms of their own abilities to care for others. There's a lot of really firm research on the cost of caring. Sometimes you'll hear it called vicarious trauma. It's basically the stress inflicted by those who help. Everything that we've been talking about in this presentation, your teachers are the front line of it, right? Showing guy, the counselors. If we ever see a student, usually it's because a teacher was told about that emotion or event or whatever in the first place. They have to bear the brunt of that until they can unload it. And that's obviously over the past couple of years taken an enormous toll on the staff. So we want to make sure that as we work with the students, we're not losing sight of the teachers, the staff members, and all staff as well. And so we just realized it's really the same questions that we're asking of the students. What are we doing to build staff resiliency skills, and what are we doing to support those skills on a daily basis? Great examples, we're constantly doing staff wellness type trainings, yoga, breathing, these kind of things. And then where's the follow-up, right? Where's the acknowledgement that on a daily basis, here's a good time for you to do this? Where's the overt supports saying that, here's the skills that we expect you to use because, we need them, right? That they're there for you. So that's something that we're also kind of keeping an eye on. We're looking at with the August in-service, have some additional things. And again, it's not a one and done ever kind of situation, coping skills, resiliency skills, right? It's how do we get these skills and how do we support them, on a day-to-day basis. So we're keeping an eye on those things as well. Okay, like we said, we didn't want to overwhelm too much up front because I know there's a lot of already bubbling kind of questions. So we want to be able to answer any of those as directly as we could.
So, teacher or parent contacts you about student who's having some issues. What kind of communication or follow-up is there? So you can meet the student and you determine that yes, the position exists and what can we do to help you with the issues. Then what happens after that? What kind of communications that were to parents assume everything the case is closed?
Well, it kind of depends on which pathway it comes through. If it specifically, like we have like the SAT program, right? We've talked about that a lot of years. That has a very structured follow-up kind of system that comes with it. Now, there's also more informal, maybe a parent makes a phone call or something. And that, unfortunately, we haven't had much of a structure to do continued follow-ups. That was part of the purpose now of bringing on a second school psychologist, that we do want to do more of that. Whether you've been officially SAP referred or not, if you have this concern, we talk to you about a plan as a parent, and from there, it just depends on how confident you are in following through on that plan, right? Like if that parent is, they know the phone call to make, they already have a therapist up their sleeve, whatever, then that's going to be pretty minimal follow-up. If they they really don't know what to do next, we can help them make those phone calls and just continue to check in as often as we need.
Tony, I know we were in the habit of doing this all the time. Can you back up and show the staff?
Sure.
Because we use it so casually. But can you just explain what it is? What it stands for?
Absolutely, sorry, that's one of the older ones too, so I just, yeah, it's floating out there. So that's the student assistance program. We actually have support from the county, from the intermediate units, where they come in, they can screen students that are referred by either teachers or other staff members or parents. They do a mental health screening, they make a suggestion of future supports. Sometimes they're able to do a few sessions themselves, but usually that's just as like very short-term kind of a situation before they usually hand off to kind of further support. So it's basically just a screening.
Well, we have a team in all three buildings. We have a staff team at the elementary, middle, and high school, and those folks, that team meets weekly.
And they've been trained to be on that.
Yeah, they're certified, trained to be on that team, and they have a caseload of students. So, Fran, when you ask what happens to the kiddo, typically we ask the parent to allow them to be in the staff program. And then they stay in that staff program really until the team decides they don't need to be in there. And that could be multiple years.
And during that entire time, there's communication with the parents, or is it confidential with the parents?
Amongst that staff team, there's communication back and forth, and that team has kind of a confidential nature about it. They, as a team, they know what's the next steps and how many follow-ups. So yeah, we keep logs internally about that.
Do you report back to the parents?
Oh, yes. I mean, and again, like I said, especially in terms of providing direct service, it's typically extremely short term at this point. So it's a lot of it ends up back on the parents to follow up and counsel.
And if they are seeing a therapist outside of the district, if that hasn't yet occurred, I'm not sure if it has, but if it has, are you able to have parents sign off so that you can work with that therapist as well, so that you are all, it takes a village, right? We all say that at the time, but so that you are working with the therapist, with the parents, with the kid, and everybody's on the same page.
Yes, and we've done that in the past. It's been pretty limited because again, that's a lot of hours to go into that. But having more people aboard is going to give us more of a chance to say exactly, right? You're working on this coping skill in a session. You're in a building outside of here. You need to use that coping skill here at school. So how do we even know about it if we don't make that connection? So we're hoping to do much more of that in the future.
We have a meeting this week with the Achievement Center. Cassie Dundon from the Achievement Center meeting with her, just kind of as a follow-up to what they I sort of made it, I think Justin, Keith, and I, the three of us, have really just made it a personal mission to be as informed on mental health issues as we can. This suicide, I will tell you, has really taken its toll on the staff, particularly administrative staff, the middle school and the central office. It's been rough. We always say not on our watch, and unfortunately we have on it. We're committed to not allowing that to happen. It goes so much further though, and I was really well spoken last week about a parent, and I really took what she had to say to heart. I think it goes so much further than the things that Shelby and Tony just outlined. We can put program after program after program in place, but we really have to drill down to the individual child, and that's what our focus needs to be. Is teaching our staff and teaching our administrators and counselors to recognize signs in children and listen to children and not dismiss their concerns like we often do as parents and as teachers, right? Sometimes someone's saying something, they say it so many times, you're just, okay. But we have to listen and we have to understand what they're telling us and what they're trying to tell us. Because I think we've missed that. And we're not perfect, we make mistakes. And, we're just really on a mission to not allow this to happen. It's scary stuff. It's traumatizing. We said, it happening over the summer might have been a bit of a blessing because we didn't have an empty desk, right, to walk into the next day at school. But Tony reminded me that summer might be the worst time because now it's going to hit you again in August when the kids come back in September, and then it's going to hit you again in December when the holidays roll around. So Fortunately, we have we have a really good working relationship with the young lady from the class with her parents, mom and dad, and mom is kind of an expert in the field to go along with it. So we're going to be tapping into the resource that she can be for us, and trying to tap in also to the achievement center to see what they can do for us. So it's more than just programs, though. I think it's more, and that's why Tony was very thoughtful in putting the word mindset in the presentation, because I think it's more about a mindset. And we are so focused sometimes on academics, right? How can we push our kids? How can we get our kids to excel? How can we get them to the top universities and get the high SAT scores? And we need to circle back and think about two other important things, and that's student safety and security with Brian and what he's doing here with the officers, and then mental health support as well. Because I don't think you can learn unless you feel safe, right? And I don't think you can learn unless your head's in a good spot and your mind's in a good spot. So that's really going to be a big focus this year. You're going to hear us talking a lot about mental health supports and what we're doing for all of our students and our staff. Because as Tony said, we have some staff. I saw people crying last year that I've never seen cry before, and I never thought I'd see crying in school. And they're tired, they're exhausted, and so we're going to be providing support for them as well. It's going to be a bit of a mindset shift, a bit of a paradigm shift, if you will, because we're so focused academically and athletically and artistically, and that's our mission, right? And we still have people saying, you don't have enough AP courses in Fairview. Why don't you have the International Baccalaureate program in Fairview? And we're going to be saying, let's take a step back. I mean, like today, I emailed Jim. I know today you got a letter about, we still want to talk about this book in the library. And right now, I'm not concerned about a book in the library. I'm concerned about keeping your kids healthy and safe and prepared for school and being able to concentrate while they're here in the building, right?
But that book could help somebody.
That book can absolutely help somebody. That book is still here, and it's just not in our system to be checked out. But that book and books like that and other resources could definitely help somebody. And it'll still be at the high school to help people. Books like that, but they can help kids find their way.
I think it also helps. I mean, I went through so much training on all of this Studio 3 project for years and years. And I think it really helps the students too, to know that they're not alone in the way they feel. That if you were to ask the classroom and honestly write down, check one of these 3 boxes, fold it up and put it in, and then we're going to redistribute it. And you don't know whose you have, but we want you to raise your hand if yours says they sometimes feel, left out of the group, or they sometimes feel this, and people start raising their hand, looking around, and are so surprised, because they think they're the only ones. So if they know that they're not, that maybe they'd be a little more apt to talk to a friend, and that friend might be able to recommend that they come and see that they go to the therapist or they talk to a teacher or something. Because right now, they'll put it in.
Yeah, Fred, you're right. And you look at somebody like, young Mackenzie Band, who's on Personnel Matters tonight. When it comes to putting a reading circle together, or teaching math or science in elementary school, I imagine she's really, really good. She learned all that in college, and she's going to be excellent at it. What she's not going to be excellent at on day one is telling the question to the students, because you don't learn that. There's no class for that in college. You learn that by doing, and then you learn that by professional development in your school district. And so that's our responsibility now, to train our folks and to make sure that they're well equipped with that knowledge. Because that's something that not only Mackenzie, but then also a veteran teacher at the high school student for 25 years might not have, unless we provide it to them. So that's the mission now, to provide them, to equip them with those skills to recognize signs and then to find their way to support the people that need.
Okay, so I have a question about, as we added a school psychologist because our population has grown, at what point in time do we add another guidance counselor? Because we're looking at the recommendation that from the.
You mean at the middle school?
For anywhere, because the recommendation is like 250 kids per person. But even the national average is apparently 415. We don't meet that. And I know that as the older kids have bigger issues sometimes, but it starts someplace. So even though you're talking about the little kids here, there's 726 of them
Yeah.
at the end of the school year at Pbis. And then there's 598 kids in this building. And then finally, we have, you know, we're at least dividing up the responsibilities, but they also have college applications and things like that at the high school too. So at what point in time are we talking about that we don't meet the needs of the guidance counselor? Because we know that those are the kids that those are the people that everybody can talk to. Some of these other resources, they might need parental permission, or they might have to go, you know, get some other signing off in order to be able to talk to those people. But the guidance counselor, every kid can talk to their guidance counselor.
Yeah. That was a discussion we actually started having, well, Steve and I have had that discussion for a long time here with the middle school, but I won't speak for Mike, but I can speak for Steve because he told me this. He said, if I could have the children here, that's my first choice. I want the children, I want, you're getting two people. You're getting the counselor and you're getting the therapist, right? He said, if I can't get the children, we need to circle back and talk about the guys. So I know that was the middle school's recommendation and their hope. The guidance counselor isn't necessarily a therapist. They have different, they're bringing different skills than a therapist and a mental health counselor. So while it would be nice to have more bodies here, our first choice would be someone that's trained more in that area and more focused on it. So that's our first choice. And hey, Steve and Mike, if you told me they were looking at another guidance counselor, they'd take it in a heartbeat, right? But their first choice is to have someone that can do that more targeted mental health support right now.
First of all, Dr. Kincaid, thank you very much. It's very heartfelt, very kind. I had written down actually during the security the same thing that you said, Pam, because they are so we're below the national average in nothing except for counselors.
Right.
And when we come back in September, we're probably going to need children that have more needs for counseling. And I hear we're sending a lot of money out for student security, but this is in the building and this is mental health. And we're below average in Fairfield, Pennsylvania. And I have two statements to lead up to this, and they're statements, but you can please help. One is you use the word resiliency, but you know, that has a lot of connotations to it. And I don't believe what you're saying is like pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right?
No.
Resiliency has a different definition for you, am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to our guiding questions there of,
Right.
that we're not pinning this on the students,
Right.
asking ourselves what skills and what support are we giving to grow that resiliency. Yeah,
I
it's not,
just wanted to make sure that was clear, because that goes into my part two here. Mentally healthy students learning resiliency is going to look very different than someone who is not mentally healthy. And so it's going to look very different in those, and all teachers need to know it's going to look very different. And they're not going to be able to just go by the same questions or see the same. It might not look anything the same. And that's why I would advocate for us to not be below average on counselors in buildings. The only thing we're below average on that I can think of. We have new football helmets.
You know, obviously, we're trying to put the best package together, and starting with the school psychologist, we thought that was a big piece. Tony was just spread way too thin. And you know, and now they have a system set up. They're splitting the grades. They've got to organize where Shelby's going to have one responsibility, Tony's going to have another. Tony's also overseeing the resiliency that we have to bring in. We really think that the getting the 2 employees from AHN per building is going to give us way more bang for our buck. So we'll see how that goes. We're pushing them really hard for the middle school. They told us no. They basically told us no. And then we told them that we weren't going to accept no as an answer. And unfortunately, we may have to, but we're trying again. I mean, Justin and I are going to meet with them this week as soon as they reschedule, because they had some folks who got ill and couldn't meet with us. and now the directors came back from vacation, so we're trying to pin them down for a meeting this week. And we'll do whatever it takes to make that happen with that.
It's gonna free up some burden on the guidance counselor, right? So, because now they don't have anywhere in-house to refer those, those higher need cases to. So now they'll have a place and, they can work with more kids. Although our guidance counselors never turn away kids, right? The children, just take some burden off and they'll have a place to refer those, more frequent visitors.
The thing about the server room, if you look at like our refocus room at the high school, that we've had now for what, 14, 15 years. Kim Enterline is a staff member and a counselor. Kids know her as well as they know Mrs. Delicious and Mrs. Jensen. She is a part of the fabric here. She's there. They know her. They love her. They go to her room. I don't think there's a stigma attached really to going to Mrs. Enterline, right? She's cool and Matt's cool and it's fun. So she's still going to be there. That's probably the biggest benefit of having her transfer to AHM for us. We've had her bounce out to 3 different employers at our request, right? She started with Sarah Reed, and she went to Bethesda, and now she's on AHM. But she's landing in a really good spot. She's getting a better job.
And if we don't get the children in the middle school, it doesn't mean that the middle school students can't take advantage of those services, right? And we could have the therapist or the counselor meet with that student, maybe find a room, a smaller room. They could come and, every now and then with that one or two.
I think Highmark wants to keep it exclusively at the high school. But what it does is frees up, our current Sarah Reed counselor, the therapist that comes in, staff referrals and so forth. It takes a whole building off of their list. So it does free them up a bit. So meet with more kids at the elementary level.
Now, I will say though that even at the high school, AHM wants it to be exclusive here at the high school. But I will say that for our kiddos here at the middle school who are high need, we're going to make sure they're seen. And we already had that plan in place with some students for next year. So that will happen. But the good news is too, and like I said, we just found this out on Thursday of last week. But the other good news is we are getting another person. I don't know what that person looks like yet. I don't know how much the grant is yet. I haven't heard any of those details. But we're meeting this week with the Department of Health to find out those details. I'm assuming we're going to be able to hire our own person. I don't know if we're going to be looking for like a licensed clinical social worker, or if we're going to be looking for someone that is, I don't know yet. I just don't know the detail on that. But I'm assuming they're going to give us a lump sum and say, here, go find your person, and just send us the bill.
I just want to say that trauma and mental health is not defined by a zip code. And I think it can change very quickly. I believe that trauma, as you keep adding to it, it multiplies as well. And I want to make sure that somehow this is expressed to the teachers, especially to the administration as well. I'm sure you all have it. But it looks differently, and when you get one more added trauma, you have an exponent. And that might not look like the grid that you showed us. And teachers might possibly, think they're following right along, but that one added trauma is going to change your percentage really quickly, like overnight, like in the middle of the night when there is no counselor.
I think that's kind of the point behind that ATSS model, right? We hope that all students can, show that regular course of resiliency and that aim to support us. But for those students who, can't, the students who have things that rise, we're preventing them from making that normal progress, then we have additional support, additional identifiers. And that is communicated to the teachers that, okay, this is student who's just going to take me to the bath right now. So that's part of that model that gets baked in, is the communication of, you're going to do what every student individually needs.
Kelly, Tony and Shelby and I met with a large group of Fairview Middle School parents a couple of weeks ago. All parents who were impacted by the tragedy that we had. And something that came out of that conversation was, we have this model that we hear us say it a lot, right? See something, say something. You hear us say it all the time. We preach that, Raz preaches that. The kid probably come up and say it to him because he says it so often. But we're always saying, see something, say something. See something, say something. You know who's really good about see something, say something? Elementary kids and high school. You know who's really bad? Middle school kids. And the reason they're really bad is because elementary school kids don't know any better. They see something that's wrong, they run to Dr. Horn and say, hey, Dr. Horn, so-and-so's doing this in the bathroom, and Ben takes care of it. The high school, their brains are more developed, they get it, and they'll go to Luke, they'll go to Sarah, they'll go to Brian, and they'll say, hey, this isn't right. Like this kid, this guy isn't right, this girl isn't right, can you do something about it. At the middle school, though, there's so much fear of losing a friend. There's so much fear of, if I tell on Colleen, she's gonna be mad at me. Or if I tell someone that Colleen wants to hurt herself, she's not gonna be my friend anymore, she's not gonna talk to me. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge for us as educators, and that's a challenge for parents to get that through their children. Like, when do you tell an adult that one of your friends is in danger? And we have to hit that point home really hard with middle school kids. And they have to get over it. They have to get over a buddy not being happy with them or being upset with them or disappointed with them. I can tell you, and Luke can tell you, and Scott can tell you, because he sees me through our computer. I'm convinced that we saved at least one life in high school last year, at least one, from a student speaking up and saying, middle school, it doesn't happen as often. The reports that we get, the anonymous reports that we get at the middle school are more things like, so-and-so did something on the bus, or said something mean in class. It's not the mental health stuff. It's not the, hey, my friend needs help. We get that at the high school. Those are the things we get. So-and-so is struggling, or they have a drug problem, or they're talking about hurting themselves. We don't get that in middle school. And that's the mindset. When we talk about mindset and teaching kids, that's Tony and Shelby's real challenges. Teaching the staff how to draw out of the kids, and teaching kids it's okay to report this.
Middle school is the age where they have more, they need more crossroads than any other group. You know, they're not sure what's expected of them. They're not sure, you know, how they should act or how they should behave. They're just learning a little bit.
They're really finding
And they are, and that's why I keep going back to, you know, boy, I think personally, I think the middle school has more of a need for somewhere in the children than the high school does. And again, I don't know, I'm not here every day, and I don't deal with it the way you do, but it's always been my experience.
The numbers on supported friend probably, I mean, what we see coming in from anonymous alerts and things like that, I don't think supports it, but the notion of the middle school being a really tricky age, that definitely supports it for sure. I mean, it's a tricky age. Mike deals with it. Mike has kids in his office all day, every day, and it's tough. I mean, he's got a really tough job because he has to distinguish between what's unkind behavior, what's bullying, what's pervasive, what's occasional.
The middle school students trust me, and they always have, as a teacher, you can talk to the students, and you're able to pull things out of them that, you know, they just always found that trust in you. And that's so important to be able to have that. And I don't know, when I remember my own kids talking about that how many years ago now, but, you know, it just, not everybody has that trust with the students. And that's why you're in a great position right now, because you must be teaching, because more kids can access you as time goes on. But there are very few teachers that they felt that way about.
You know, it's tough, Fran. When I was growing up, and probably when a lot of us were growing up, I used to hear, like my parents used to say, I used to hear people say all the time, oh, boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. That's what boys do. And it's easy to dismiss behaviors as that. You know, I'm sure Mark was the hellfire as a kid, and his parents were like, boys will be boys. That's just a deal. And I was the same way. My brother, hey, but you know what? And a lot of it we say, I had 3 daughters, so I think I can say it, like, my daughters went through a lot of drama in the middle school. But sometimes it's not drama anymore. And it's hard to figure out what's drama and what's real, right? And Mike's, his door never stops opening and closing all day long. He's got to distinguish what is real and what's drama, and what's kids being difficult, what's boys being boys. We don't use those terms anymore, though. You know, we've changed our lingo. We don't use those terms anymore. It's not we get boys being boys. It's not middle school girl drama anymore. We've erased those terms from our vocabulary. We take them all seriously.
I want to ask, for some reason, this children does not, it fails to come through. Will someone please call me? I will find money for it. I will find a grant somewhere.
I don't think it's money. I think it's personnel. Yeah. AHN isn't worried about losing thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, right? They're multi-million-dollar companies. So they don't break even on these showrooms because they're providing 2 employees for the price of 1. It's personnel. They thought they had somebody, and the person backed out. And they're not confident with the master.
There are colleges that do teach this, and maybe looking at some of those colleges when we're looking for new hires might be part of the process. I know I was taught in my college 25 years ago, which would explain gray hair, or bringing or asking for more of this education to come to our local colleges.
We're going to have a program at Fairview Middle School next year, one way or another, this year, one way or another, whether it's through AHN or it's specially designed through this grant that we're giving. We'll have something here. We just hope that it's the research-based program from Allegheny Health Network. That's the one that we have a lot of confidence in. One way or another, we're going to have something.
And I have confidence in you guys. Thank you.
We're going to make it happen, one way or another. We need it. All right, Jim.
All right.
I think we beat that one. Thank you, Shelby and Tony. We appreciate you.
Thank you both. So thanks for being here and leading the discussion. And too, I can speak before again, your 3 priorities are becoming more and more important. We will support. So thanks for taking the time to keep us updated. So, David, go ahead. Kick us off, and I am interested in what you may hear from the state budget, because it's all new and out of the press, so.
Yeah, so it is good news, and I just have a couple figures. I don't have anything specific to prepare because again, the timing of it, preparing material for the board meeting and everything, so I know we're going to plan on having a larger discussion on what the state, what the differences in the changes in the state budget really mean to us. But overall, I just want to start off with really the one main thing, the thing that really made a lot of the news when it came to education funding is the basic education funding. That went up statewide, so $525 million was put into the basic education funding. An additional $225 million was put into the level up formula. That's designed to really hit 100 school districts that have the lowest funded at-risk population, so Fairview does not qualify for that. But we do qualify, obviously, we do get part of that $525 million that was put into the basic education funding. So our increase in basic education funding is about 11% from last year. Again, we budgeted 0 increase because we had no idea where the state was going. There was a wide spectrum that they said would happen, and it came up somewhere in the middle, actually. So 11% increase for us, which comes out to about $394,000. So when we break that down on a per student basis, again, I'll have presentations and more slides for this in the future. That comes out to an additional $180 per student. So even though if you go on the Pbis website and you look at the spreadsheets that are out there, 11.5% increase for Fairview is the second highest increase percentage-wise that you see in Erie County. But when you break it down on a per student basis, again, $180 is the lowest per student increase that you see in the county, and we still have the lowest per student Pbis funding in the county also. And again, that's related to the discussion we had back in February or March about how that formula works and how certain things, how it's designed doesn't really favor Fairview because there's less need here for funding because there's more ability within the district to generate revenue. Similarly, along those lines, special education funding went up about $60,000. Again, we budgeted 0. That represents about a 6% increase in the special education funding. So that's the next biggest line item, funding-wise, for those subsidies that we expect to see an increase in. That subsidy changed a little bit this year. So how it always goes off, they take our special ed population and puts them in certain categories or tiers, I forget exactly what they call them, a 1, 2, or 3. As they go up in those categories, basically they're supplying more weight because that identifies that a student has more need. So the more weight the student has, the more funding that they would get. They changed around with those formulas a little bit this year. I didn't get a chance, again, with it being so new, to really break that down. I would think that with the $100 million increase statewide in special education, we would have seen a little bit more than 6%, but I think how they changed those categories around a little bit, it didn't work in our favor in that way. But again, I'll be able to break that down and show you when we have a future board meeting after we have more time to digest it. Two new things that came out that we just really got details on it over the weekend. I mentioned the $127,000 worth of physical safety within the buildings. That was $100 million statewide. That was divided up. Every single school district in the state got a base amount of $100,000 and an additional amount based on enrollment. So with the way that formula is set up, that a $100,000 base obviously goes a lot farther in a district like Fairview that is small versus a very large school district. So that $127,000 is a very, actually a very generous amount for us. Casbo, as I mentioned earlier, they believe, they think that that physical safety grant might be something that is carried forward in the future state budgets. We're not sure at this time, so we'll be tracking that as the state goes through the next budget process. And that is specifically state dollars that will be coming in. One of the other things that's new is in equal amount, the same exact formula. So we're getting another $127,000, excuse me, funding for mental health for students within the district. And that is coming through the state, but it is federal dollars, and they're very sure that that is going to be just a one-time funding for this school year only. So that's something that, as we've talked, and we get more direction on how really our mental health goals, we can really look at how that grant is set up and how we can apply those funds toward the goals that we are working towards. So really those four things, the basic ed, the special ed, and physical safety and the mental health funding are really the big things coming school district wise. There are some other small changes that will affect us a little bit, but I'll get them when we do have a state budget update. After we get a chance to digest this all, there will be there. But those are really the key highlights to take away for budget wise. Any questions on that before I dive into the Treasury Support?
So Nick, just a summary, the big news there, we budgeted 0, and we got 3.
So we got between our two subsidies about $350,000 more. I'm sorry, $450,000 more. We basically get special ed, then another about $250,000 for physical safety and mental health. So we're looking at 450, so another $700,000 of revenues that we have. And go ahead with a couple days. So we definitely will be having many more discussions on what to do and really strategies and goals and what the working towards and how we're going to look at using these funds to best benefit the administrator. Yeah, it's definitely very good news all around. It was probably they said they said this last year that we had historic increases in like basic and special ed funding, but that was kind of tamped down just because the year before that there was 0 increases in those funding. So it worked out the state averages really when you looked at over those 2 years. But this is truly historic funding into school districts statewide. It is not a complete really game changer for Fairview, mostly because, like I said, those formulas that they work with don't really favor Fairview or things like that. But so overall, like when we look at our budget updates, and I have that pie that's up there, it shows about 70% or so of our funding comes from local, and another 28% so comes from state sources. It's going to make that state source piece, a percentage or two bigger. We're leaving some of that burden on the local source side. That's really the net effect for us going forward, assuming that those other $250,000 for physical safety and mental health are not continuing. With an increase in Pbis and SEF are the main ones that are going to release some of that local burden. So that's something that we look forward to seeing. Anything that makes our local burden smaller and the state burden higher is definitely beneficial for it. Any questions on that before I dive in here? All right. So for the Treasury Support, this is as of June 30th, 2022. So the end of our fiscal year, we are still going to be going through our year-end close process.
Interrupt you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna recommend we take a quick break.
Okay.
Yeah, I see, I got to do that already. And maybe this is a good time to go. We'll just come back, all right? For physical health.
so this is before the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. There will be some changes to these numbers as we go through our year-end close process, final year-end reconciliation, get things ready for the audit. So we are going to see different numbers presented, at the end of the audit when Mr. Burnley is here going over our final audit report. Things that are completely expected and then things that we plan on making changes for. And I'll highlight some of those as we go through this. But overall, for the month of June, $56,000 surplus. A little bit of a surplus there, as you'll see as we get to the other pages. There was a little bit of state, but they're pretty much cleaning up a lot of the remaining state revenue that came in through in June, mostly the basic ed subsidy and special ed subsidy. Those are obviously a little bit of a higher revenue line in the month of June compared to our other non-tax collection months. Overall, year to date, we see a loss of $670,000 again. $503,000 that is that planned loss digging into that committed fund balance for the 2021 debt. The rest of that, as it is right now, $167,000 loss will come from unrestricted funds. We'll see how that ends up shaking out by the time we get finished with our year-end work, though. For earned income taxes, you'll see that our final for 21-22 came in almost exactly where we were for 2021. Even though, as you remember, we had that giant month in the month of May where we had really high collections. It really has been the trend for this year. That month after our peak month has been generally very low, even when compared to like previous years. And so we saw that happen again. So overall, when we look at this final quarter for the year, we're pretty consistent. It was a very good quarter, but it's still fairly consistent to what we normally would expect to see in the fourth quarter of the year. But still the strongest quarter that we've had, I believe, historically. So it did, because we did have low June amount, it did make it more of a normal month, not what we would expect with that very large amount in May that came in. And cumulative collections by month, you see we did have that jump up in May where we finally got above the previous year with that dark blue line, but again, finishing right where we ended last year, basically. So revenue-wise, so we discussed earning income taxes already. You see the real estate tax line. This is all sorts of real estate taxes, current and delinquent, and any penalties or discounts against them. About $20,000 above the budget. That is one of the numbers we expect to change a little bit over the next 2 months, really in early July here, which came in today. And then early in the next month, we'll get 2 more checks from the county for delinquent taxes that were collected in May and June. Those will be booked as receivable at the end of the year. So we do expect our real estate tax line to go up a little bit more than just that $19,000 clear the budget. Not an enormous amount or anything. Usually, delinquent real estate taxes slow down around now. We see them pick up again when the asset tax sale really happens in September. So people get off that list. $21.1 million in total of the local sources preliminary through the end of the fiscal year. And as I said, the basic ed subsidy, that line has really been collected in full. Special ed subsidy, you see, this is one that changes throughout the year, or historically has. It changes a little bit through the year. We get preliminary numbers in July, and then it gets finalized, and all the inputs are done being calculated in February. And ours this year went up about $6,000. That is one other thing that's really changed in the state budget is that the numbers that we see for special ed subsidy in July of each fiscal year, those are going to be set in stone. It's going to be pretty much like with basic ed subsidy. So we're not going to expect to see fluctuations for the special ed subsidy in the future just because they change slightly how that is calculated. So 2 other state items you see that we are below budget in here. So the retirement social security subsidy, that $95,000 being below, that's one of those year-end reconciliation amounts. We're going to do a calculation to see what is receivable for the Social Security subsidy. Expect that to be $100,000 or so upwards, so we think that line might be slightly above budget for the end of the year. And other state subsidies under about 105, that's one that's probably going to end up being a little bit under budget. That's really related to our transportation subsidy. If you remember, for that subsidy, what we get for the current fiscal year is based off of our transportation expense for the previous fiscal year. And even from the, so as you think going back to the 2021 school year, transportation was very much different than it was this school year. We included a decrease in our budget for that, but we saw an actuality a little bit more. And that's from the PASO webcast that we heard today, was that was pretty much consistent across the board statewide. The state actually has, I believe,
the state of Pennsylvania had an additional about $100 million of transportation subsidy that was not given out to districts because almost everybody's coming in below the amount there. Then we also had another line, probably about $25,000 related to students that meet certain criteria. That we do get a subsidy from the state, and we just had none of those students that met this criteria this year. So that's a line that we usually expect to get about $25,000 in for state subsidy, and it was zero this year. That's just how many students we had in it. So overall, $29.7 million in revenue, pretty much right on budget overall, 51% off when we look at everything in total. We'll see where we take out at the end whenever we finalize our reconciliations for year end. Expense-wise, personnel costs, $19.8 million overall, and just 1% of the budget. That number's gonna be pretty solid and not change too much as we go through our final process. So feel pretty pleased with our budgeting process for wages and making sure that we're right on. One thing that you will notice, if you look at last month's Treasury Support, you'll see that this line here for the purchase service, that went up about $2 million on the budget and on the actual side. That again is related to the budget adjustment that was approved for taking the funds that are sent to the tech school related to their capital project. That can't be capital expenditure for us for PE guidance. That has to really be a tuition expenditure for the school district. So you see an enormous increase there. But again, equal amounts, $1.9 million more in budget, and the actual is $1.9 million more, just moving those funds to the proper category for PE reporting. So this $29.9 million of total expenditures, again, that is net of that $503,000 loss that we're planning on taking for the youth digging into that committed fund balance, and the remaining 167 that we discussed is, as of right now, will be coming out of the unrestricted fund balance. We do have an update for Norbit for the month of May. It is actually a positive one. We saw a positive return of just under $100,000 for Norbit. That puts us at about 5.1 months in reserve. It's only the third positive month that we've seen for 21-22, or as far as we've reported. The June numbers should be coming in shortly. Shortly in a couple of weeks here, so we can close out the year. But good thing to see. I know I've said it every time for the 3 times we've had a positive month, that we hope this trend continues. So I do hope it does happen this time, so we can get more towards that 6 month in reserve and possibly have a funding holiday in the future to build up the fund balance. Overall, for investments within the district, $52 million in investments at the end of the fiscal year. Again, most of that is in the construction fund. There's about $30,000 of the cash value sitting in our construction funds, whether in the money market or the CDs that mature every month. It's about $3 million down from where we were at the end of last month, but a large amount of that is attributed to the construction funds being spent out. This is for the investment program, for the investments that we purchased, that $9 million is an investment program that we started in May. Really not much has changed here, except coming up, we are going to have less than a month from now our first maturity out of that. This is the 3-month maturity that we purchased, so it has that sort of lower rate of 0.8%, much better than we were seeing historically when we're looking at the money market. The goal again is when that does mature, to then make a 12-month purchase out of that. So we'll stay on this schedule of having a maturity every 3 months. As of last Friday, when I looked at the 12-month security would be about a return of about 2.7%. So again, as our first 3 securities do mature over the next 9 months, so the first 9 months of having this program open, we hope to have then all 12-month buys after that, and hopefully the lowest return that we see when we actually have 4 12-month maturities in our portfolio will be that 2%. And it looks like at least that trend is going to work for the first one now. Right now they're about 2.75. The other funds of the district retirement benefit account finished about $7,000 below where it started at the beginning of the year, $758,000. Again, board policy is to have 2 years in reserve, 2 years of expenses in reserve at the district retirement benefit account, and we have close to 3. So that is functioning. Functioning very well as it is right now. Cafeteria fund saw a small loss in the month of June. It was not a full amount of operations as we normally would for a full month. So revenue was much lower than it would have been with less meals being served. But overall for the year, a $208,000 surplus. Capital projects fund for the full year is ending, so it's ending at $6.3 million, about $100,000 going up. Pretty good for capital projects, but we know most of the capital project spending has happened in the construction funds, where overall for the year, cash-wise or really fund-wise, that we experienced $21 million of expenditures. So ending fund balance of about $27.5 million for the construction funds at June 30th. Cost tracking overall for the high school, you see that we have about since the beginning of the project, so this is going back even before this fiscal year that just closed. This is going into the 2021 fiscal year even. Spent about $20.4 million on the high school. You see that overall we're at net $12,000 decrease based off of our change orders. The change order that we're discussing a couple different items further down for electricity. I did include that in the spreadsheet, so even with that add of $16,000, if you approve that, it will be a overall still a decrease in electricity contract by about $5,000 there. For the elementary school, the project is really wrapping up. $4.1 million expended. Most of the contractors, really except for HVAC, they're going to be working through to the end of, really through summer to make sure everything is up and running. But the other contractors that we have out there, they're pretty much wrapping up. We'll get to see remaining any pay applications that come in are going to be really lowering the payment amount that we have, and possibly change orders approved by the architect for any zeroing out any contingencies that might be still built in our project that we still have balances. So really a lot of the work is finishing out there. It's mostly just HVAC work happening now. So we include the financing costs that happened at the closing of the bonds. Overall, we have about $25 million of expenditures of bond funds since bonds closed. About $53,000 is in activity account balances at the end of the year, and no changes really in membership since the end of May through the end of June, just in those couple school days. But obviously, as we talked about all year long, the main story being that we ended last year with a total membership of 1,797. We ended this year with a total membership of 1,876. So an increase of just about 80 students one shot. And for kindergarten enrollment, at the end of June, we had 118 students enrolled. Pretty much right on pace to where we were last year again. So that's almost the 130s are pretty much fully in play for August and school. And that is all I have for the Treasury Support. I believe I have the next agenda item also. I'll bring that up here. So one budgetary transfer, very small one. This is just with special education funds, moving funds out of moving funds into the books account to just properly create enough room in that budget to properly expense the cost of the store combination books into the proper category. Nothing really significant there. Not creating any more expenses, just moving funds to the proper category.
Folks, item number 5, you don't see these very often, but when it happens, we have to have the board approve it. A confirming order just simply means that an order is placed prior to doing the appropriate paperwork process. That really didn't happen in this case. What happened was John ordered filters for HVAC. Anything under $2,000 does not need board approval. In this case, they tacked on some shipping costs that he wasn't aware of, and it pushed it up over $2,000. So that's why this is, by definition, a confirming order. Really not a confirming order, but nonetheless, by definition, it is. So our orders that are under $2,000, as I mentioned, don't need board approval. That has been in place for, look at these terms, 10 years, at least 10 years. We are probably going to come back to the board with a policy change recommendation to increase that amount. $2,000 doesn't buy a whole lot anymore, especially when it comes to either technology or materials for John to purchase. So we're going to probably come back with a recommendation. We'll work with you calling, come back with the recommendation to increase that amount. But Nonetheless, we do need you to approve that confirming order for the filters for the HVAC system. The change order that David mentioned is for some additional gym lighting. And the explanation for this is as they were doing the project at the high school for the gym lighting, they realized that it wasn't as bright as they wanted it to be in terms of foot handles. So they're adding an entire row of lights. And again, when it's something that the architects technically miss, I guess, it's fair to say, it's our responsibility to pay for it. So you have a better explanation for that, David?
Yeah, so really the original quotes, as we approved, they didn't include this additional row of lighting, so they had that additional row of lighting when the original quotes were received, they would have probably included this extra $16,000 in cost.
We're still in good shape in terms of change orders. It's on the plus side.
Yeah.
But this is one that is biting in a little bit, the cost of $16,000. We have 3 purchases over $2,000. The first 2 are for this evening, right, Molly? And the third one will be for the next meeting. Pbis for tonight. So A and C, the fitness, the obstacle course for Pbis. This is a curriculum purchase for PE. The Wilson Foundations is a curriculum purchase for the elementary school, and then B is our tech shop supplies for those for the high school renovation. So those are the reason those are on because those are for construction costs. The other 2 are curriculum purchases. That will take 2 meetings for approval. Any questions for Justin on this curriculum purchases? If not, we have 2 athletic camps for your approval. One is for a cross-country camp for grades 2 to 8. And then there's a girls soccer camp coming in here. The Bearing coaches are going to help out with, and those are on for your approval this evening. The mentor job descriptions are simply the job descriptions for the folks to serve as mentors for our new teachers. All new teachers to the district by school code have to have a mentor, and we do that. We provide a senior teacher to work with them. We typically write new job descriptions for all those because we want a certain kind of teacher to work with them. For example, Libby tonight, obviously we want Abby at the high school to work with Libby because it's in this exact same area, autistic support and life skills. So that job description is written so that someone with that background can support the new teacher. So those mentor job descriptions are on for your consideration. BNI ESY contract. So we already had a contract approved with the Barber National Institute for extended school year. We had a student there though who was attending there who needed some additional supports in place. So that's what this approval is for the aid for that particular student who was attending BNI. Pretty typical and standard stuff at Barber National Institute. And then our personnel matters. Very excited about Libby Corteau at the high school. We think she's going to do a really exceptional job. Kim Enterline, just as our summer school facilitator, she's been doing that for us for a number of years. We have a couple of part-time aides coming on board. And then, of course, Mackenzie Van in the first grade spot. So when David mentioned that our overall employee costs for next year weren't going up, he forgot to pat me on the back for staying under budget on all of our hires this year. But I know you meant it, David. I know you meant it because you told me. We try to budget. We plan on about 3M, which is master's degree level, step 3 on our employees. Some years we hire people that, for example, Mrs. Pataki is coming to us from Northeast. I think we ended up hiring at 6 or 7M, just to get her here, right? To have a qualified math teacher. But in the case of Mackenzie, in the case of Libby, because they don't have public school experience yet, we're able to get them at the bottom at the first step, which is step 1M. I think we hired Walter, I think it was 2, step 2, because he's a year in the city. A couple of ECAs there for gifted and student council advisor, and some fall ECAs there for athletics as well. Middle school, cross country, a couple grads coaches there as well. If there are no questions on personnel, Mr. Lyons, that wraps up our meeting.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kincaid. With that being said, we can segue into the public board meeting. And we'll start with the resolution. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Eric, you still with us? Yep. Molly will need you for a roll call, but we can't hear you. Is your volume, is your speaker not working? I can't hear you. I'll let you give Molly a thumbs up then, okay, or thumbs down. Can you hear us? All right. Yeah. All right, do we have any public comment on the agenda items? Seeing none. Item 3, business operations. Consent agenda items. I move board approval of the following consent agenda items for business operations. 1, minutes of the board meeting. 2, budgetary transfers. And 3, bills payable. Roll call vote.
Mrs. Bryant? Yes. Mrs. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
We lost your video too. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Mrs. LaFerry? Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. McManus?
Yes.
Mrs. New? Yes. Mrs. Tobin? Yes. Mr. Lyon?
Yes. Treasury report, June 2022. Mrs. Sullivan?
All right. So, Treasury report for the year ended June 30th, 2022. Current year-to-date revenues $29,779,820. Current year-to-date expenditures $30,450,425. Total cash on hand and investments for the general fund $14,111,362. Current investments for all funds $52,105,824. Capital project fund total fund balance $6,373,081. 2021 bond construction fund total fund balance $27,515,610. District retirement benefit account total fund balance $758,374. Cafeteria fund current year-to-date revenue is $975,452. Current year-to-date expenditures $766,607. And then student activity account balances $3,851 for middle school, $48,606 for the high school.
I move board approval of the treasurer's report for June 2022 as presented, as well as the capital projects report, the cafeteria report, district retirement benefit account, and high school and middle school activity accounts.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
You said yes.
Mrs. LaFerry?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. McManus?
Yes.
Mrs. New? Yes. Mrs. Tobin?
Yes.
Mrs. Bryant? Yes. Mr. Lyon?
Yes. So Molly, do we have any correspondence that needs to be?
I do not.
That's great, thank you. I'd like to recognize the visitors that were here earlier tonight, or those that are joining us remotely or online. Thank you. Committee reports. The Fairview Board School Directors met as a committee of the whole on June 27th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. at the Fairview Middle School. Board members present were Mrs. Bryant, Mrs. Fox, Mr. Hayes, Mrs. McCarty, Mr. Lyons virtually, Mr. Mahoney, Mrs. New, and Mrs. Sobin. Also in attendance were Dr. Zona, Attorney Joseph, Mr. Namara, Mrs. Palm, Mr. Farringer, Mr. Herring, Dr. Skelly, Dr. Neese, and Mr. Keddy. Committee of the whole, consent agenda items. I move board approval of the following consent agenda items of the committee of the whole as presented. A, FMS musical contract, Elf Jr. B, Achievement Center, and Animal Assisted Therapy contract. C, 2022-23 ECA supplies bid. D, Wilson's Foundation's purchase. E, confirming order, we just talked about. F, FHS change order EC-2. G, athletic camps. H, purchases over $2,000 that were discussed. I, mentor job descriptions. And then lastly, BNI, ESY contracts.
Second, Mahoney.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
McMahon?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Bryant?
Yes.
Yep.
Caroline?
Yes. Item number 4, personnel matters. I move board approval of the personnel matters as recommended and or read by the superintendent and as identified on the personnel list to be approved with the stipulation that positions be filled only if the program or activity is to be conducted as determined by board action.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Mrs. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. McMahon?
Yes.
Mrs. New? Yes. Mrs. Tobin? Yes. Mrs. Bryant?
Yes.
Mrs. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Line?
Yes. So, Mrs. New, do you have anything, any updates on the I-5? Report? Thank you. Thanks for your volunteer. I have nothing to report as the legislative liaison, except that I encourage all of us to kind of pay attention to what's going on and get a chance. It's very interesting, at the state level and federal level. It's good for us to be educated on that stuff. Mr. Mahoney, anything that the
Renovation continues, and they are in need of both an auto body and an auto mechanic teacher. So if you know anyone with those skills, that may be a great change of pace to teach students. They've been advertising that for some time now. Challenge in finding a qualified candidate. That's all I have.
Good. Good. Thanks for your volunteerism as well. Holly, do you have anything?
I do not.
That leads me to turn it over to you, Dr. Kincaid.
Yeah, but we're going to keep it very brief tonight with commendables because I know the board has an executive session and it's already 9 o'clock. So just want to thank Tony and Shelby for their efforts tonight. I know they spent some time putting that presentation together and working with the administrative team. So thank you guys. And summer's going along. We gave John the night off tonight. If anyone needs a night off, it's John. He's been really working hard with the projects here and trying to coordinate everything with the contractors. But things are going really well, as you can see. I went away for a week and came back, and the high school looked different. So it's coming along quickly. And I haven't seen the inside of the high school, but I hear it looking more different. So, it's exciting, and hopefully by this time next year, we should be wrapping up. Ben is moving things into the new pod, and that is going to be up and running for the start of the school year, and ready to roll.
It is, it's ready to go, and everything's in there, and we're just waiting for teachers to come back.
We'll give them a few more weeks.
We'll restart it. That's all we have to do. Thank you so much. All right, thank you. And thanks for all your dedication to the entire admin team this summer. What you're doing, we appreciate it, so thank you. Mrs. Jones, any comments from your end? No. Any other board remarks as we go to the order tonight? No. I have no remarks as well, so that being said, we will adjourn to executive session. Thank you.